call me a monster and an animal for defending the situation. I will say this. The cop was following the procedure.
Never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show, You Made It Political. Here in upstate New York, we have a lot of really good, juicy stories for you all this morning. You know, there's days where I turn on the news and I'm kind of thinking to myself, oh my God, what does this world come to? It's all negative. It's doom and gloom. I think there's no hope in anything, really, that's going on in today's society. And then there's other days like this morning where I take a look at Fox, I take a look at CNN and everything else that's going on out there, and I think, wait a second, things might actually start to be looking up. Obviously, not everything, but there's a couple things that are actually starting to go our way. And by our way, I mean the Republican way, the conservatives' way. Things like the fact that the House majority is only up with the Democrats by a 2-seat vote. It's the worst lead they've had since the 1940s. So that's all looking good. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about the stupidity, once again, coming out of AOC's mouth. AOC's running her mouth again. We're going to hear what she has to say on the Dante Wright killing that happened a few days ago in Minnesota. We can always leave it up to AOC to be an absolute moron when it comes to what she has to say about pretty much anything. So we'll talk to AOC, or we'll listen to AOC talk, and we're also going to talk about the fact that I believe there's more media lies regarding Joe Biden's health, because something very fishy happened this morning that had to do with Jill Biden and President Biden making a visit to a medical clinic in Washington, D.C. this morning. So let's get into the show. We got a lot of good stuff to get through. Thank you all for joining me this morning. Sit back, get comfortable. Let's get into it. So today we are going to start with Biden. Listen, we all know President Biden's health is deteriorating at rapid pace. There's no disputing it. What I'm trying to understand is why the Democrats don't want to talk about it. Why don't they ever want to talk about Biden's health? It's okay if the guy's going senile. It's okay if he has Alzheimer's and it's getting worse. Just tell us. It's not a big deal. What are you hiding? What's not okay, however, is if it was fraudulent from the very beginning. That's grounds to remove him and completely kick the Dems out of the White House altogether. Basically, it'd be a fraudulent election, part 2, because we all know what happened the first time, and the Republicans would potentially assume power. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but all I know is Biden would, in fact, be an illegitimate president if they actually committed fraud as far as his health condition was concerned, if they didn't disclose the health conditions to the American people and just how bad he was before getting elected. That would make him illegitimate. Would Trump be back in? I'm not sure. It sure would be nice. It'd solve a lot of the issues that we're having today. But the fact of the matter is that they continue to hide his health condition. So this morning, when I pulled up this article, I thought, wait a second, the BS radars kind of went off, and I thought, I'm not buying this. This is total bullshit. I just can't get into it. So President Biden on Wednesday accompanied First Lady Jill Biden. This is the story. Okay, this is their story. So the press broke that President Biden on Wednesday accompanied First Lady Jill Biden to an outpatient facility in Washington, D.C. for what the White House said is a common medical practice. So right away, I'm like, hold on a second. Take a look at this picture, people. Okay, that does not look to me like Biden is accompanying anybody. That to me looks like Jill is accompanying Biden. I mean, it looks like Biden once again has no idea where he is and that he can barely walk and that Jill has to. I mean, this is what you'd see when grandma is walking grandpa into the party and grandpa kind of doesn't really know what's going on. And grandma's like, no, honey, over here. come sit down here, and Grandpa just kind of sits there in the corner for 2 hours. Again, not really know what to do with himself while Grandma keeps checking in on him. That's what this looks like. So they're claiming that Biden is the one accompanying Jill, but this picture clearly dictates another story. And I love how Fox News picks this picture. You better believe if we saw it on CNN, they'd have like the one snapshot of Biden standing on his own. They'd say, okay, can we just get a shot of Biden on his own just for 2 seconds, but make sure he doesn't fall over. Like, let's leave him be, run out of frame real quick, snap the picture, and hurry up, get back in there before Biden topples over. That's what CNN would have done. So I love that Fox News actually picks this picture here, and it clearly shows what's really going on. So this to me does not look like Biden's accompanying anybody. So then I took a look at the story and I thought, okay, well let's take a look. Let's find out the details before coming to conclusions here. Let's take a look at why Jill Biden actually went to the doctors or for a medical procedure today. What procedure did she get? Now, I understand that, you know, not everybody wants to talk about their personal health, and I totally get that, and that's 100% understandable, especially if it's, you know, has to do with female issues and stuff like that. That's kind of nobody's business. But, you know, let's see if they did release anything at all. So, according to the press, President Biden this morning, Wednesday, accompanied First Lady Jill to an outpatient facility in Washington, D.C. for what the White House said is a common medical procedure. Okay, great. Any more information there? The Bidens were inside the downtown D.C. building. We don't even know what building. Okay, first of all, what building? That can give us sort of an indication as to what might be going on here. Nope, no information whatsoever. Just a building. So the Bidens were inside the downtown D.C. building for about 2 hours. Elizabeth Alexander, communications director for the First Lady, provided an update later in the morning. Okay, what was the update? The update was that the First Lady tolerated the procedure well and is headed back to the White House to resume her normal schedule. That doesn't really give us much information. It doesn't give us anything at all. And then it goes on to discuss the president's schedule, blah, 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 and what else he's doing for the day. And then, of course, it goes into Trump. I love how every article, you know, here's what's going on in the world today. Now Trump. Every time. Gotta love it. And you can't get through an article without Trump. Whether it be the right-wing media or the left-wing media, everybody wants to talk about Trump. It's good for ratings. Some of my best shows ever have been talking about Trump. And we don't need to really go into it, but that's all there is about that story. So that's it. That's all you get with this story. So I thought, am I the only one who thinks this is like complete BS here? Let's see what the American people have to say. I was like, well, let's take a look at some of the comments off the back of this story and see if I'm being a little bit kind of malicious in my intent to chalk this up as fraud. Should I really be saying this, or does practically the rest of the country have the same feeling? So I took a look at some of the comments. Lo and behold, everybody thinks the same exact thing. We all think it's BS. So these comments are great. Alyssa says, looks like she's holding him up and guiding him. Oh my God, he's our feeble ruler of this free country, not mine. Exactly. So I'm not the only one who thinks that Jill Biden is the one actually holding up Joe. Okay. Gene says, BS, it's an appointment for Joe, a dementia appointment. Ding, 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 ding. Good. I'm not the only one who thinks he's going in for a procedure that has to do with dementia. So Gene says, BS, it's an appointment for Joe, a dementia appointment. We are being lied to again. Now here's something suspicious, and I'm glad that Jeer Smith brought it up. Why not Walter Reed, where president and family are always treated? Odd. That's very suspicious. It's a great point. Why aren't they going to the Walter Reed Hospital, where the president and the family are always treated? Hiding much from the public? So we clearly know now this is not for Jill. It's got to be for Joe. Something's going on here. I mean, we've seen him. We've seen him try to read off the teleprompter. And when there is no teleprompter, I mean, it's a lost cause. It's a totally lost cause. Because every single time that you let Joe Biden do anything freelance, it ends up becoming a total disaster. I mean, if you remember the press briefing that he gave a few weeks ago, where it ended with him saying, the thing, anyway. And he just kind of hung his head low, and that was that. So we know Joe can't really get through a sentence on his own. We know he can't hold a cabinet meeting without some sort of guidance there. There's a big lie going on in Washington, D.C. about his health. And if you've noticed, every single time that he has any sort of interaction with the public, his, whatever they're called, I don't know, communications directors or PAs or assistants, but they're always rushing the press out of the room. I mean, you hear them, and they're rude about it. They are aggressive. They're extremely rude, and they're rushing the press out as quickly as they can. They don't want anybody to hear a single word that's not scripted come out of Biden. That's how it always is. So pay attention next time when you do see this press briefing, and watch what happens at the very end and how quickly. I mean, they are scared to death, his communications directors. They're scared to death of a reporter asking a question, and Joe just kind of turning around and be like, huh? And then just giving away the fact that this guy is clearly unstable. So I'm not the only one who thinks the fact that Biden accompanying Jill is total BS and is just more lies out of Washington. Let's see what else some of the American people have to say about this story. Nancy says, look at the beautiful way President Biden and Dr. Biden hold each other. In that simple gesture, we see so much love. It's wonderful to see this loving, faithful couple running our country. Nancy, listen, girl, unless you've been living under a rock, which it appears that Nancy is, they're not holding each other in a loving, romantic way, Nancy, okay? Jill is holding Biden up from falling. Joe's not holding Jill. Nancy, I'm not sure what picture you're even looking at, but this in no way is them holding each other in a loving way. Joe thinks he's talking to somebody, and Jill's trying to guide him from making sure he doesn't trip over himself and do more somersaults. So there's nothing, I don't see that. Nancy claims that they're holding each other in a loving way. I don't see that in this picture. I think this is just Jill making sure that Joe doesn't topple over. So for those of you who are just joining us, we're checking out a story, which I think is a total lie. I read it first thing on Fox this morning. The story claims that Biden is the one accompanying Jill to an appointment. We have no idea what this appointment is. We have no idea what building they even went to. They didn't go to Walter Reed. So the whole thing is very suspicious. And we're trying to get to the bottom of this. We think this is an appointment for Joe, obviously. We think his Alzheimer's getting worse. And once again, the Democrats are lying to the American people because that's what they do. Kathy says it was most likely his appointment, and she was holding him up to keep from falling over. Exactly. It's exactly what I think. I mean, guys, come on. It's insane, and it's quite insulting, actually, that the Democrats and the media continue to take us for fools. And it's insulting that they keep coming out with this stuff, and this is why half the country is so pissed off right now. We're just really frustrated and upset at the fact that we're constantly being lied to. If they were just honest about the situation, then you know what? I'd feel bad for the guy and I'd stop ripping on him every other day. But until they're going to come out with it and say Joe has Alzheimer's, it's open game. I'm just going to harp on the guy every single day and be like, oh my God, what an idiot. He fell down the stairs again. Oh my God, look at him walking around aimlessly. He looks like, I can't believe this is our president. But if they actually admitted he has early onset Alzheimer's, I'd have some sympathy for the guy and I would stop. I think anybody would. I mean, Alzheimer's is no joke. I've seen family die from Alzheimer's. I see it's a horrific disease. Very long, drawn out, painful disease. It's painful for both the patient and the family. And I would have a lot of sympathy for Biden. But I have none, because apparently there's nothing wrong here. So it's not just me. Everybody thinks this is a lie. Regina says, how about you accompany her down to the border and see the disaster you created? That's probably a good idea, but we all know that there's no way Joe can make it down to the border right now. I mean, Kamala Harris hasn't even gone down to the border. Why? It's the worst crisis we've pretty much ever seen in modern day history, or at least since we've had borders, and we go back a few hundred years. There's a horrible crisis down at the border. Joe Biden refuses to go. Kamala Harris has not gone yet. No one cares. But of course, they're all been out of shape over another cop killing, which we all know after seeing the video was an accident. But you better believe they're right on top of that one, calling the family. What can we do? Jill, Joe, or Kamala. Focus, people. The border. Let's get down to the border and let's fix this mess. Okay? Let's fix coronavirus. You said you were going to curb the pandemic in your first 100 days. Buddy, your 100 days are coming up quick. And these are real issues that we need to solve here in America. Stop spending money. Every time I turn around, Joe wants to spend another $2 trillion. Let's prevent this country going into the greatest recession we're ever going to see. I'm not really interested in what the BLM and Antifa thugs are doing over in Minnesota right now. I'm more interested in saving this country. And maybe if you want to actually do something about the Minnesota issue, round up all the gangsters who are rioting and burning and looting and stealing again, and let's throw them in the paddy wagon, get them off the streets, clean the shit up, or get rid of the officials who are running the show there. But do something. It's good to see that the National Guard is actually in charge, finally. And that's only because the Democrats have, for once, in a long time, or at least in this term, are deathly afraid that things have gotten so out of control that even they cannot control BLM anymore. So we know it's total BS. We know that Jill Biden was not the one who had the procedure today. Joe had the procedure. And everybody has come online to say just that. So what is it? Didn't Biden promise to be fully transparent about his medical history if elected? Well, he's not. He's not being transparent at all. So speaking of Dante Wright and the accidental shooting that happened a couple days ago, leave it to AOC to run her mouth. It's always good to see AOC come back on the scene. You know, I was really enjoying a few days of, or a few weeks of not listening to this idiot ramble on. I mean, we all know, if you don't know, a survey already came out a few weeks ago. AOC is actually the least most effective Congress member in Congress right now. She's like the least effective. And how do you come to that conclusion? Well, because she runs her mouth all the time, doesn't shut up, promises the country the world, promises change, promises all these things, and doesn't actually do anything about it. And that's because nobody wants her to do anything about it. I mean, even the Democrats are sick of AOC. So you better believe, though, she has something to say about this. And here's what AOC has to say, which is totally moronic and idiotic of anybody to say at this point. Because if you haven't seen the video, it's all over the internet of the actual body cam from the officer who thought she had a taser gun. She actually had a real gun. She yelled, "Taser, taser, taser," on the video, thinking it was a taser to let her other officer colleagues know, back up, I'm about to tase him. She pulls the trigger. She shoots him. She realizes and says, holy shit, I just shot him. That's what we've seen so far. This is not hearsay. This is not an opinion. This is fact. We've all seen the video. So we don't know what the deal is yet. We need to let due process kind of unravel the situation. But AOC doesn't want to let due process be had here, just like most of the Democrats don't want due process. They hate sticking to the law unless it fits their narrative. If it doesn't fit their narrative, you better believe we're throwing due process out the window here. So AOC and a Twitter, so she takes to Twitter to post more crap. She writes in Twitter posts Tuesday, AOC, she tweets opposing the argument that Dante Wright's shooting death in Minnesota was an accident, as police have claimed. So now AOC tweets, I don't believe it was an accident. First of all, AOC, who the hell are you to voice your opinion on any of this? It's not up to AOC to decide. I mean, what is she, the freaking, that's it? AOC says it's not an accident, so let's, case closed? Case closed, done. Don't even need a trial. We don't even need a trial here because AOC already said it wasn't an accident. Okay. So AOC's an idiot. She runs her mouth once again. She's saying that Daunte Wright death was no accident. Instead, part of indefensible system. Okay. First of all, I have a big problem with everybody blaming law enforcement right now. And I want to set the record straight. And I posted this yesterday on my Facebook feed. And I said very clearly, I said it's very simple. Don't resist arrest. I'm not sure what else there is to discuss, but that's it. Very simple. Don't resist arrest. Because if you resist arrest, you're increasing the odds of things going horribly wrong. It's just that simple. I mean, that's what happens when you resist arrest. So the post got a lot of support. Most of the people who follow me, they are mostly Republicans, mostly conservatives. Yes, there's a few liberals who still stick around to listen to me talk shit all day. And I actually appreciate you guys. Any of you liberals watching the show, I really appreciate you as viewers. I sincerely mean that, because I think it's good that we have this debate and that we question and challenge each other. And I do respect that. And somebody did question me yesterday on my post after I posted, it's very simple. Don't resist arrest. Not sure what else there is to discuss. So I did get a comment that I want to read my reply to all of you, because I think it was it was a good point that she raised. I'm going to try to block out it. Well, I can't. Sorry, Marty. I hope you don't mind. So everyone on this comment chain is missing the point. So Marty says, everyone on this comment chain is missing the point. And I knew what Marty meant. I knew what she meant. I knew that I know what point she's trying to make, but at the same time, I'm trying to make a point too. So I wrote, Marty, actually, this is the exact point I'm trying to make. I don't care what color you are. If you resist arrest, you are dramatically increasing your chances of something horribly going wrong. Until state legislators change the law that says you no longer have to comply with an officer's demands, then it's probably best that all races comply. Just comply, and the outcome will most likely be very favorable for everyone. What happens before or after is a whole other story, and one that the statistics will tell me more about, not the mainstream media. I'm sick of listening to the mainstream media on this case. I don't care what mainstream media has to say about anything, because we know they all, regardless of what side of the fence they sit on, they all want to control their narrative for their viewers, for their own ratings. So I don't care what CNN has to say about this. Apparently, Black Lives Matter doesn't care anymore either. They told Black Lives Matter they're making things worse. Or Black Lives Matter told CNN the other day during the riots a couple nights ago, they're making things worse. CNN is making things worse. They're even sick of the media right now. Okay. So I said, what happens before or after that incident? It's a whole different story. That's not my argument, but it's one that the statistics will tell me more about, not mainstream media. I'd be very curious to know if we genuinely have a racial issue here, or if just as many white people who also resist arrest end up hurt or killed. I've never heard a single news outlet actually present those numbers. And trust me, I don't think anyone here, meaning on my thread, is missing the point. I believe they all know what point I'm trying to stay focused on. And trust me, out of all of the 300 and odd people who like this post, 316 people, I know my followers. I know the types of personality. I know who these people are. They did not miss my point. They know exactly the point I'm trying to make. So I want to take that one step further right now and just and explain this. I'm sick of the police officers constantly getting the blame for this or being forced to take the fall. The officers aren't the ones writing these procedures. They're not the ones sitting at the top telling the law enforcement agencies how to act, what to do during a procedure. They're not, the officers are not the ones writing legislation. Who's in charge here? Not the officers. It's the elected officials who sit at the top, write policy, and then tell these officers exactly what to do. It's very simple, guys. It's in their POS and their SOGs that they have to follow. These officers, this is not the wild, wild west. They're not allowed to just go out there guns blazing and do whatever they want. Yes, there are a few rogue officers who try to get away with it. I don't think this female officer was one of them. But listen, the point of the story is here today that it is not up to me or AOC to say, nope, it's not an accident. It's really not up to me to say it absolutely was an accident, even though she claims it was, even though it looked like an accident. That's for due process to sort out. Because I'm not a cop. I've never been in that situation where my life is potentially in danger, where I have a split-second decision to make. So I go for my gun, or I go for my taser, and I know they keep a taser on one side and the gun on the other side from what I've read. And in the heat of the moment, everything happens so fast. I draw my gun thinking it's the taser. In my mind, I'm thinking it's the taser. Things are chaotic. I'm pointing. I'm still thinking it's a taser. It can get away from you very, very quickly. We've all been in those situations where we might be driving, something happens, and we just freeze. Or we think we're doing one thing, and we're like, oh my God, what am I doing? How did that just happen? Sometimes your brain your actions doesn't do what your brain thinks it's doing. We've all been in these situations. So I think it's very childish and very amateur for somebody, especially like AOC, who doesn't have a freaking clue, and she's an idiot, and everything that comes out of her mouth is so stupid. And she sounds like a 16-year-old half the time. I don't even know how she's going to get reelected. I hope she doesn't, because like I said, according to recent surveys, she's the most least effective member in Congress. So she comes out, and she has the audacity to come out and say that she doesn't believe it was an accident, but instead part of indefensible system. Well, AOC, who's writing the system? Who's in charge of the system? AOC is, or at least legislators who sit at the top and vote for this stuff, vote for these bills. So who's to really blame here? The law enforcement officers who are just following standard operating guidelines? Or the legislators who make the laws that then pass these policies and procedures, these guidelines down through the system? So I think we need to think very clearly here and start to kind of point the finger at the people who are really responsible for this entire situation. And no, I don't believe it's the police officers themselves. They are following a system. Let's take a look at the keyboard warrior comments and see what the American people have to say about AOC running her mouth once again, calling the incident between Dante Wright and the officer who accidentally shot him. AOC's calling this no accident. Rob says, the young man pulled over for an expired registration. Totally legit, but if I were a cop in today's environment, I'd just let it go. Then they run his license standard procedure and find he's wanted for failing to appear in court on a previous arrest for possession of a handgun without a permit. I believe I have the charge correct, and I think so too. That's what I've read a lot of times. So the officers had a high probability to believe he was armed. Very high probability. He's got a warrant outstanding for his arrest, an outstanding warrant for his arrest for possession of a handgun without a permit. So right there, okay, hold on a second. There's probably a gun in the car. He's got an outstanding warrant for arrest from owning a handgun without a permit. So he probably has a gun in the car. So the officers had a high probability to believe he was armed. They attempt to arrest him. He violently resists. Again, back to my post. Don't resist. Like, it's that simple. Do not resist. If you don't resist, none of this would have happened. Like 99.999% chance none of this would happen. So they attempt to arrest him. He violently resists, attempts to flee. By the body cam video, one of the officers draws what she believes is a taser, yells taser 3 times to warn the subject, and the other officers then fire the weapon. Unfortunately, it was her handgun and not the taser, and she fatally injures the young man. A tragic incident, but totally avoided if the young man complied with the officer's directions and not violently resist arrest and attempt to flee the scene. These are the facts of the unfortunate incident. Very well thought out. I'm giving this guy a love because it's a great thought out answer, and that's the situation. The point is that regardless of what happened, if you just didn't resist arrest, we might not be in this situation. Renee says she's right. A system of those who like to victimize criminals encourages them to resist authorities, which led to their ultimate demise. Seriously, wake up. Every single death could be prevented if the person complied with the authorities. There's an overwhelming amount of support here that all says the same thing. Just comply. If you just complied, you wouldn't be in this situation. Elliot says AOC is totally out of sync in lieu of what's happening in the George Floyd case and all the riots and how lives are totally destroyed. She thinks that this woman cop intentionally murdered Dante Wright. What a fool. For cops having to make an arrest on a black person in Minnesota is job suicide. It really is. These cops are exiting in droves. They want nothing to do with being a police officer, especially in these Democratic-run cities. I mean, who would want to be an officer here? Who would want to be on the ground right now in the epicenter of hell in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, which we all know is very close to Minneapolis, where the George Floyd incident is going on right now. The George Floyd case the case isn't even over yet. And look what these officers have to look forward to. So George Floyd, regardless of that outcome, now we've got Dante Wright to deal with. What we should be saying is everybody go home. We're not buying into this BS narrative. He resisted arrest. We'll handle it from here. We'll let you know once the case is over, because we all saw the video. This was not a hate crime. This was not a racial issue. We saw Dante Wright resist arrest. Now, there may be some other very important and serious matters that we as a country need to take care of. I'm not disputing that. And I'm not naive to think that racism does occur all over the country. But we're not going to keep victimizing criminals to prove our point. These criminals will go to jail or they will die if they resist arrest, if the police end up defending their lives. It's going to, listen, I don't need a crystal ball to tell you guys, it's going to happen again and again and again and again. Black people, get used to it. White people, get used to it. Asian community, get used to it. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what race you are. If you resist arrest, you're putting yourself in danger. And I also heard comments from people that said, well, resisting arrest is not grounds for murder. It's not grounds to get shot. You're right. It's not. But things go wrong when you do something stupid like resisting arrest. You're increasing the probability of things going wrong. It's like me saying, if I cross the street without looking both ways and I get hit by a car, I'm right because I had the right of way. Yeah, I might be right, but I'm still probably going to die. If I cross the street and I don't look both ways, my increases of getting hit by a car and dying are greatly increased. So, yeah, a car's supposed to stop for me. A cop is not supposed to just shoot you if you resist arrest. But because you resisted arrest, things go wrong. And this is the point that so many of us on social media are trying to make today. Nedra, in response to AOC, saying, I don't believe this was an accident, which is completely idiotic, insane for somebody like AOC to say. Nedra responds with, what is it? Either law enforcement is good or bad. You want them to protect you, the Capitol. So she's responding to AOC, hold on a second. You're the one who came up with the crazy freaking story about hiding in your room during the Capitol and claimed that people were outside trying to get you while the police, the Capitol Police, came to your aid and rescued you. So you love the police then. Now you don't like the police. So Nedra's saying, what is it? Either law enforcement is good or bad. You want them to protect you, meaning the Capitol, but you don't want them to protect others. Defund the police. You thought they were after you and you weren't even there. So she just called out exactly what I said. We as a country definitely have things to work on, or definitely have things to work on. But as long as you are protected, you can spew forth anything you want, again, as long as you are safe. To hell with everyone else. When it was in your backyard, you cried wolf. And that's exactly what AOC did. So people, be very careful when you scream abolish the police, when you scream for police reform. Because when you have an intruder in your home and he's got a gun, and he threatens to kill you or your family, or God forbid he does, and you wish the police were there, you may think differently about this entire situation. We need the police. It's as straight as that. Ben & Jerry's came out this morning. There's a post, there's a news article going around. Ben & Jerry's, they are now calling for abolishing the police. I mean, what does that even mean, abolishing the police? How do we abolish the police? Hundreds of millions of people in this country have guns. What are we going to do? What are you going to do if you don't have a gun and we have no police? How are you going to stop a criminal with a gun? Because we're not getting rid of guns. That's in our Constitution. It's embedded in our Constitution. The Democrats have tried over and over and over again. Even if they do manage to get rid of AR-15s and semi-automatics and reduce the caliber of a bullet, we're still all going to have guns. We have shotguns, we have handguns, and you better believe not everybody's going to give up their guns. So you get rid of the police. You now have most of America owning a gun. You have criminals who own a gun. What are you going to do? Fight them off with your butter knife? You can't call the cops, remember, because we abolished them. So you got to pick a side here, people. You're going to, when push comes to shove, I guarantee it's not going to be Black Lives Matter. I guarantee you're not going to be teaming up with the Antifa. You're going to probably want to stay in your comfy little home, in your little suburban house, with your children and your white picket fence, and Fido the dog, and your police department. Because I don't see any of you wanting it any other way. So it's not all doom and gloom. As I was scouring the news this morning looking for a hint of positivity, I came across this post for once. The clouds are lifting and there's signs of hope for the Republican Party. House Democrats are barely, for those of you who haven't been paying attention, House Democrats are barely holding on to their majority, with Representative Julia Letlow, who is a Republican in Louisiana, set to be sworn in this morning. She replaced her husband, who actually died of coronavirus a couple months ago. He was about to be sworn in. He won the election. He was about to be sworn in. He never made it. Julia, his wife, then said, you know what? I'm going to step in for my husband. It's a very nice story. If you haven't read it, read up on Julia Letlow. She's continuing the work that her husband, who was elected as congressman in last year's election, he ended up dying from coronavirus a few days before the election. So Julia's now stepped in. She's won it. The Democrats are now only hanging on by a shoestring. To give you an idea of how important this is, or what this means, or how good this is for the country, the Democrats have not had this little of a margin since the 1940s. So we are gaining seats. Everybody keeps saying, oh, it's over for us Republicans. We're doomed. Never again are we going to win an election. Well, we are now down to a minimum margin of 2 seats. So things are looking up. They're looking up. And as of now, the House Democratic margin shrinks to 2 votes, swearing in Julia Letlow. So things are looking up. Pelosi's losing her edge, and she knows it, which is why the sneaky Democrats, if you haven't heard, are trying to turn Washington, D.C. into an actual state so they can pick up 2 more seats. We all know the Democrats like to rig everything that prevents them or that's in their way of becoming elected. I mean, look what they did going into the 2020 presidential election. They changed all the state laws, or as many of them as they could, to try to rig the election in their favor. And then all of a sudden, we saw what happened on November 3rd, and nothing made sense anymore. It's because the Democrats were busy rigging everything along the way. They continue to do it, and they're continuing to do it right now. They know they are in the gravest danger since the 1940s of losing the House majority. And it's freaking Pelosi off, because we know if the Republicans take the House, Pelosi's job's done. I mean, that's it for her in Washington. She'll be sent packing the next night. She's done. Nobody's going to keep Pelosi around. Nobody wants to hear Pelosi. They're already even kind of already turning on her because she's just gone so far left and so radical. And she's pretty much in the same boat as Joe Biden right now as far as senility is concerned. Her, Biden, Schumer's kind of getting there. I mean, we don't need these guys in Washington anymore. They need to go. So what this means for the Democrats, House Democrats are barely holding on to their majority with Representative-elect Julia Letlow. She's being sworn in right now this morning. So Letlow's joining the House and the seat originally won by her husband, Luke, I told you, who died in September from COVID before he was supposed to be sworn in. So what does this mean? How great is this for us Republicans? What hope does this give us? This gives Republicans 212 seats in the House, okay? Catching up to Democrats 218, okay? Since tie votes fail in the House, so if there's a tie, whoever brought the bill fails. The bill fails. Okay, so since tie votes fell in the House, that means Democrats cannot lose more than 2 votes from their party to pass legislation if the GOP fully opposes them, which we all know the GOP today is fully opposing everything because we've never been more against what the Democrats stand for. We've never been more against what the far left are trying to accomplish today. We know it's a very far left, radical, progressive agenda, and the Republicans are just completely against it. And I even think Mitt Romney is now thinking what an idiot he's been to break from party. I think all of the rhinos who have broken from party over the last few votes are starting to regret that because we are coming after them in the 2022 primaries. I will be campaigning hard to remove all of them from office. And so will so many other high-profile influencers. I mean, I don't even consider myself one of those high-profile influencers. There's guys out there who have massive followings, and you better believe they're going to be campaigning hard to get rid of these rhinos. Even the ones in my own backyard here in New York State that constantly vote with Democrats. They'll be the first ones gone. So we know the GOP fully opposes them. We're now gaining on our seats in the House. The slim margin of error could prevent Democrats from passing more progressive bills. So this is great news that moderates in their party may not support. And we're already seeing it. We're already seeing it with this most recent $2 trillion infrastructure bill that we all know only about 6% is actually going to real infrastructure. Of course, Biden and the Democrats have thrown a whole bunch of shit into this bill. Once again, they like to throw all of their own personal agenda into a bill and then pitch it to the American people that, wait, this is really for America. No, Joe. $2 trillion for elderly care, schools, climate change, electric car manufacturing. That's not infrastructure. Infrastructure is transit systems, railroads, bridges, buildings that are on the verge of collapsing. That's infrastructure. You trying to take care of the elderly homes and the school districts because you promised that to the teachers' unions, which you've been doing a lot of lately, and screwing the American people and the children along the way. That's not infrastructure, Joe. My school taxes pay for that. My health insurance pays for elderly care homes in the form of health care. We don't need to print more money and stick me with the tax bill because you guys are morons when it comes to spending. But I'm not the only one now who thinks this infrastructure bill is a bad idea. Democrats are now breaking from their own party and are voicing their concerns over it. Joe Manchin, huge GOP or huge Democratic leader, one of the senior Democratic leaders, big voice in the Democratic Party, he's against this bill. Why? Because in order for this $2 trillion infrastructure bill to pass, we actually need to raise capital gains taxes from 21% to 28%. Democrats own businesses too. Democrats do not want to see their taxes raised. I love how, when it comes to taxes and raising taxes, that's just a big no-no for everybody. Even though the Democrats tend to play we look after the American people and we need to raise taxes in order to take care of the middle class and the lower income citizens. It's all BS, because the second you actually talk about raising taxes, watch who actually opposes them. Watch how many Democrats are going to be opposed to this, because they don't want to see their business revenue get tanked by capital gains tax no more than the Republicans do. The Republicans are just honest and transparent about it. So they're already breaking from party. We already know that there's a lot of things that the moderate Democrats aren't okay with at all, and they're starting to not support their Democratic colleagues. Some reinforcements may be soon on the way. However, with Democrats favored in 2 of the 3 House special elections that will be held over the next 2 months. Friday, I can't remember what state it was, but another Democratic Congress woman died. So she's died and her seat's now up for election in Florida. So they're really starting to kind of shit themselves here. They're really starting to freak out with how little of a margin they have. 2 votes, people, is not enough. The tide is turning. The tide is definitely turning. And if we keep exposing the Democrats for the sneaky liberals that they really are and keep calling out their lies and their progressive and radical agenda, that I wouldn't be surprised if we actually did take the House in 2022. A special runoff election in Louisiana's 2nd congressional district will be held on April 24th. And the 2 candidates facing off in the solidly blue district are both Democrats. The race is to fill the seat of former Representative Cedric Richmond, who stepped down to join President Biden's administration. So we have Democrats leaving, we have Democrats dying. However, while May 1st we'll see a special election in Texas, Republican-leaning 6th congressional district, to fill the seat of GOP Representative Ronald Wright, again, who died of COVID-19 complications. There will be another special election on June 1st. So a lot's going on here. A lot of changes, even though we're not in election years. These are all special elections. The point is that we are gaining momentum. Yes, there's a couple special elections in very heavy Democratic counties that will probably go to Democrats, but we also have special elections in counties in Texas who are Republican-leaning congressional districts. Another special election in a deep blue district, Ohio's 11th, won't be held till November 2nd to replace former Democratic Representative Marcia Fudge. So there's a lot going on here. Nancy Pelosi's freaking out. Things are changing very, very quickly. And we are gaining momentum, people. We are absolutely gaining momentum. I think, if anything, what we're going to see is that as the Democrats screw up this country even more, as they continue to make horrible mistakes and further bury America beyond repair, I think most moderate Democrats are going to wake up, come to, and start siding with the Republicans, because this is getting out of control right now. I mean, this is nothing compared to anything that anybody was upset as far as what Donald Trump ever did. I mean, this is like a whole... what the Democrats are doing to this country right now makes Donald Trump look like an angel. And I bet a lot of people wish Donald Trump was back. Both Republicans, rhinos who voted for Biden, as well as many of the moderate Democrats. So the tide is turning, people. It is definitely turning. Keep campaigning. We're all a part of this campaign. We all need to get out there and do our part. We need to keep pushing. We need to keep talking. We need to keep convincing. We're going to get there. We're going to change this. You guys have a great
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out youmadeitpolitical.com.